Imagine driving deep into Michigan's wild, endless forests, thinking you're alone, until you see a rotted sign welcoming you to a town that shouldn't exist. Houses sagging under moss. Streets were cracked and silent. And behind a broken window, something moves. These aren't places that died and were forgotten. These are towns that refuse to die, where the wind carries voices, where rusted machinery hums without power, and where the past still walks in work boots and torn dresses. Tonight, we're not just exploring abandoned places. We're uncovering why they won't let go. Stay with us, if you dare, to discover 10 haunted places in Michigan. Towns that refuse to stay buried. Towns that might be waiting for you. 1. Fayette. Historic Townsite. Upper Peninsula. The wind off Lake Michigan is cold, sharp, and it carries things here. It wraps around the crumbling smokestacks and slips through the blackened doorways of Fayette, a town built on iron, now rusting away like an old promise. During the day, it almost feels picturesque. Weathered boardwalks, preserved buildings. But when the sun sinks behind the trees and the lake turns to ink, Fayette changes. Visitors who've stayed too long tell of figures appearing on the boardwalk, walking with heavy, deliberate steps. They vanish if you call out, but their footprints remain in the damp wood. The old furnaces are worse. You can stand in front of them and hear hammering echoing from within. Sharp, steady, not wind, not animals. Work, as if the men inside still believe there's ore to smelt, quotas to fill. A park ranger once locked up for the night and heard metallic bangs behind him, growing frantic as he fumbled with the keys. When he looked back, the furnace mouth gaped in silence, but the air inside it seemed to shimmer with heat that wasn't there. Shadows don't behave in Fayette. They move when there's no one to cast them. Guides have watched black shapes slip across doorways of empty buildings, pausing like they're listening. One woman who cleaned the visitor center after hours swore she saw a man in an old leather apron standing in the doorway. When she blinked, he was gone, but the floor was wet with muddy prints. Locals don't stay late. They say the workers who died in accidents, crushed by ore carts, burned alive in the furnaces, never left. Fayette isn't just a preserved town. It's a graveyard that refuses to close its gates. Iron and lake and wind, all conspiring to remember the dead exactly as they were. If you visit after dark, listen carefully. The hammering doesn't stop because you're there. It stops because it notices you. 2. Northville Psychiatric Hospital. Northville. The Northville Psychiatric Hospital isn't just abandoned. It feels abandoned by sanity itself. From the outside, it's a massive shell of gray brick, windows punched out like missing teeth. But inside, the walls remember everything. Closed officially in 2003, it was already dying decades before. Records lost or destroyed. Stories of patients screaming through endless shock treatments, strapped down and forgotten. The kind of place families whispered about in shame, then tried to forget. But the hospital didn't forget them. Paranormal groups who brave its rotting hallways report cold spots that stalk them, moving like something breathing just out of reach. They set up recorders in the children's ward and capture screams, raw, panicked, rising to a pitch that makes grown men leave equipment behind and run. And the hallways, they twist, shift. Visitors say they follow a clear path only to find themselves back where they started, doors closing behind them, the exit disappearing as if the building itself wants them to stay. A man exploring alone claimed the tiles rippled under his feet, like something alive pulsing beneath. But it's the windows that draw the most dread. Many are shattered, gaping out onto overgrown courtyards. Yet more than one visitor has claimed to see faces in them. Doctors in white coats, mouths moving as if giving orders, eyes locked in furious judgment. The glass might be broken, but the gaze is unbroken. A former nurse who returned for closure walked down a corridor she hadn't seen in 20 years. She swore she heard her name called in a voice she recognized, a patient she'd cared for, a patient who died there. She didn't finish the tour. Northville doesn't want to be remembered for treatments or progress. It wants to be remembered for what it did. And if you go, be careful, because it might just remember you. 3. Central Mine, Keweenaw Peninsula. Deep in Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, the forest parts to reveal a town that never really left. Central Mine is a ghost town in the truest sense. Rows of old miners' houses still standing, roofs sagging, windows clouded with decades of dust. But the silence here isn't empty. It's listening. At night, people say they see lights flicker in the abandoned homes. Lantern glow, moving from room to room, casting shadows that don't match any living shape. Hikers who pass through after dark have watched a single flame burn in a second-story window, steady and bright, until they move closer and see the room is gutted. No floorboards left to hold a person or a light. Porches creak under unseen weight. Locals joke that the wind makes those noises. But even they won't walk up the steps after sundown. A visiting photographer set up to take long exposures and caught the shape of a man in work clothes leaning against the post. Battered hat, head down. He didn't see it then. Only when he got home did the figure appear in every frame. Families with Cornish roots still gather here for reunions, to honor their ancestors who worked the mines. Some of them have heard voices in Cornish accents drifting between houses. One woman described her elderly father stopping mid-sentence and calling out in Cornish as if answering someone. When asked what he heard, he just shook his head and wouldn't say. No one really doubts why they stay. This was their world, the mine, the rock, the endless work. Many died here, accidents in the shaft, cave-ins no one talked about. Some say they never accepted leaving, and maybe they haven't. Maybe they're still waiting for the shift whistle to blow, or maybe they're waiting for you to pick up their tools and finish the job. 4. Pere Cheney, Crawford County. Pere Cheney isn't just abandoned, it's condemned by time, by memory, and, some say, by something far older and angrier. Once a thriving lumber town in the late 1800s, it was wiped out, over and over, by diphtheria outbreaks that left the ground soaked with grief. Almost everyone died. The few survivors left behind only legends and curses. Today, there's no main street, no shops, no homes with warm light in the windows. Just the skeletal remains of a cemetery, its stones cracked, half buried, or simply missing. Like even the earth is trying to forget. Moss covers names so completely that visitors have said it feels like touching a mouth trying to stay shut. But the forest remembers. Step too close and you'll hear it. Children's laughter, distant and wrong, echoing between the trees with no source, light and bright like a dare. Hunters have dropped their rifles and run after hearing giggles from the brush, only to find the forest suddenly silent, oppressive, the air heavy with rot. Others have reported a woman's voice drifting through the pines, low, insistent, commanding one word over and over: leave, leave, leave. A group of teenagers dared each other to stay overnight at the cemetery. They say the voice didn't start as a whisper. It was a scream by dawn. One local tells the story of visiting at dusk and finding fresh handprints in the dirt next to a broken headstone, child-sized, pressed deep, fingers spread wide in terror. No one else was there. Pere Cheney isn't just Michigan's most haunted ghost town. It's a warning carved into empty streets and fallen grave markers. It doesn't want visitors. It wants them gone. Or worse, it wants them to stay. 5. Eloise Asylum, Westland. Eloise is more than a building. It's a city of the lost spread over hundreds of acres. A psychiatric hospital, poorhouse, tuberculosis ward, and its own burial grounds where the unclaimed dead were laid in rows, marked only by numbers. Even in daylight, it feels hungry. The windows of the main hospital loom over cracked asphalt like blind eyes. Visitors swear they see faces watching from the upper floors, thin, pale, pressed against the glass. When they blink, the faces are gone. But the chill in the air remains, heavy as wet wool, clinging to their skin. The underground tunnels are worse. Designed to move patients discreetly between buildings, they're narrow, low-ceilinged, and the walls are sweating with age. People on tours report hearing footsteps behind them, slow, deliberate, always matching their own. One woman says she heard breathing over her shoulder, warm and damp, though no one was there. EVP sessions in the tunnels and wards have recorded crying, hoarse, gasping, as if the lungs had long given up, but the sorrow remained. Other recordings capture frantic whispers, the words often urgent and clipped. Please. Help. No. Paranormal investigators say it's not one voice. It's dozens, layered, desperate to speak over each other. Guides on ghost tours don't bother denying the phenomenon. They point out the doors that slam shut on their own, loud enough to rattle old filing cabinets. They tell stories of people pushed hard enough to bruise. One guard quit after seeing a man in hospital whites shuffle across the hall and vanish through a closed door, leaving a trail of wet footprints behind on dry linoleum. And the burial grounds? The headstones are simple numbers. No names, no stories. But that doesn't mean the dead stayed quiet. Eloise is a monument to neglect, a promise that suffering isn't erased when you look away. If you go there, don't call out, because something might answer, and it might not want you to leave. 6. Hungarian settlement, Upper Peninsula. Deep in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the forest is so thick it seems to close behind you, swallowing the trail whole. Somewhere in that green silence lies the Hungarian settlement, what's left of it. A failed mining village abandoned to the trees, its cellars and stone foundations still holding shape like bones refusing to rot. It's easy to miss in daylight. Just mossy stones, half-buried steps leading nowhere, cellar doors sagging open into blackness. But as dusk settles, the air changes. Hikers tell of hearing voices drifting through the birch and pine, old prayers in Hungarian, chanted in a mournful rhythm. They pause to listen, and the words stop. They take another step, and the prayer resumes, closer. Campers who pitched tents near the ruins have woken to lantern lights weaving through the trees. The lights bob and drift like someone searching, pausing just at the edge of camp before fading into the mist. One man claimed he heard gravel crunch under boots circling his tent, slow and measured, though the ground was nothing but pine needles. Some say if you walk through the settlement at night and speak aloud, you'll hear a voice respond in Hungarian, soft, curious, but growing angry if you don't leave. One local hunter tells of stumbling into a foundation and finding fresh footprints in the dirt. Bare, human, leading in circles before disappearing into nothing. Locals avoid the area. They warn that the dead there don't like visitors. They were miners who never got paid, settlers who starved in winters no one recorded, families who prayed for salvation that never came. And when they died, the forest took them, but didn't let them rest. If you stand too long among the ruins, you'll feel it. The weight of eyes that never blink. The hush that isn't quiet, but listening. Because the Hungarian settlement didn't fail. It just changed. And now, it's waiting for you. 7. Holy Cross Children's Services. Saginaw. Holy Cross was supposed to save children. Instead, it swallowed them. Once an orphanage and reform school, the building sits rotting at the edge of Saginaw, its paint peeling in long strips like skin sloughing away. Records are missing, whole decades lost, conveniently erased. But the walls remember every punishment, every scream. Those who dare to enter describe disembodied weeping in the old dormitories. Not loud sobs, but quiet, muffled cries like a child trying not to wake anyone. People stand frozen in the dark, listening, the hair on their arms rising, realizing the crying is coming from the bunk right beside them. Empty, sheets black with mildew. Near the old chapel, the air is worse. Visitors have seen shadow figures flicker across broken stained glass, pausing in the doorway as if daring them to come inside. One woman on a tour refused to cross the chapel threshold after watching a dark shape kneel at the altar before dissolving into nothing. It isn't just what you see, it's what you feel. More than one visitor has reported the sensation of small hands tugging at their clothes, insistent, desperate. One man bolted from the hallway screaming, convinced something had grabbed his wrist and wouldn't let go. When he got outside, he found tiny dirt-smudged fingerprints on his sleeve. Staff used to tell stories of doors that slammed so hard the glass shattered, of lights that flickered with no power, of prayers said too late to matter. One local priest tried blessing the property. The next day, every cross on the site was found broken. People don't visit Holy Cross looking for hope. They visit to hear the truth no one wrote down. A truth whispered in the dark by children who never got to leave. Because in Holy Cross, they don't just haunt the rooms. They wait for someone to listen. 8. Copper Harbor, Keweenaw Peninsula. At the northern tip of Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, Copper Harbor lies under a sky so vast it feels like it should swallow every secret. But this harbor doesn't let go of its dead. It was once alive with miners, traders, soldiers, a gateway to fortune pulled from the earth. Now, the forts stand empty. The boarding houses lean with age, and the hotel rooms wait, too patiently. Visitors who book a stay in the old hotels often report knocks from inside their rooms at night. Slow, deliberate. Not at the door, but at the closet, the wall, the bed frame. One guest, convinced it was plumbing, thumped back and felt something knock twice in reply. Even in the heat of August, there are cold spots that cling to your skin like wet linen. Couples strolling by the lake shiver at the same time without knowing why. A breath of icy wind will hit the back of your neck, even on still days, leaving you gasping like you've been dunked in the lake. The lighthouse, perched over churning water, is said to be watched by men in mining uniforms. Not tourists in costume, but gaunt, hollow-eyed figures in outdated gear. One keeper reported seeing 3 men standing silently at the edge of the rocks before dawn. He called out. They didn't move. When he shone his light, the beam passed through them, revealing only crashing surf beyond. Locals have a phrase for it. The men who never clocked out. Miners who dug too deep. Sailors who vanished in storms. Soldiers who died unnamed in the fort. All of them seem to linger here, held by rock and wind and memory, too stubborn or too lost to leave. If you visit Copper Harbor, watch the water, listen to the wind. And if you hear footsteps in your room when you're alone, remember, this place was built on work that never ended, and some shifts never finish. 9. Nunica Cemetery. Nunica. Nunica Cemetery doesn't try to impress you. It's simple, rural, rows of leaning headstones smothered in moss, the names worn away like secrets swallowed by the ground. But simplicity doesn't mean safety. By day, it's quiet, deceptively so. But as the sun bleeds out behind the trees, the graveyard exhales something cold and hungry. That's when people see glowing orbs, faint at first, then bright enough to cast shadows of headstones onto each other. They drift between graves as if searching for a name no one says anymore. Visitors speak of voices that come from nowhere. Stand still long enough and you'll hear them. Hoarse, breathy whispers from empty plots. One man described standing frozen as a voice rasped his name from the ground at his feet, dragging out every syllable like it hurt to speak. Locals warn about the woman in white. She's been seen standing at a child's grave, her shoulders heaving in soundless sobs. When people try to approach, she looks up, her face blurred like smeared paint, and the crying starts, wet, guttural, shaking the air itself. She's there, and then she isn't, leaving only overturned leaves and a sudden stink of damp earth. Paranormal investigators love Nunica for one reason: the EVPs. Recordings capture whimpering, pleading. The worst ones hold single words hissed with venom. Liar. Leave. Stay. A researcher once asked if anyone was present and got an answer he'll never forget. A guttural voice that simply said, "I am waiting." It's a cemetery. You expect the dead. But in Nunica, the dead expect you. They remember who left them there, and they don't forgive. 10. South Manitou Island, Lake Michigan. South Manitou Island lies like a dark secret in the blue expanse of Lake Michigan, a remote stretch of sand and forest where even the wind seems to whisper warnings. Once it was a farming settlement, but disease came in waves, ruthless and indifferent. Entire families died in days. They were buried together in massive dune graves, the sand swallowing them whole. But nothing ever stays buried here. Fog rolls in unnaturally fast, thick as wool, curling around trees and muffling sound until even your own breathing feels distant. Hikers talk about getting lost just yards from camp, their lanterns throwing light into walls of white that seem to move. One man said he felt fingers brush his arm in the fog, delicate and cold, though he was alone. The shoreline is worse. People see figures walking there at dusk, human shapes that keep pace just at the edge of vision. They never seem to notice you. But when you go to investigate, there are no footprints in the wet sand, only the shifting hiss of waves and that suffocating certainty you're being watched from just behind the tree line. Campers wake to voices outside their tents, low, conversational, as if the island's long-dead settlers are discussing them, deciding something. When they unzip the flap, there's no one there, but the sand around their campsite is freshly disturbed, as if someone circled it all night. Locals don't like talking about it, but they all know the saying, "The island calls people home." A warning, not a welcome. Some visitors return to the mainland changed, quiet, distant, unable to explain what they saw or heard. Some just don't return at all. South Manitou isn't a place you visit. It's a place you join. If you hear your name on the wind, don't answer, because once it knows you're listening, it might not let you leave. Michigan's ghost towns aren't empty. They're waiting. Every abandoned house, every fog-choked trail, every silent cemetery holds voices that don't want to be forgotten. If you visit, listen carefully. Watch the shadows. Because here, the past doesn't stay buried. Which of these places would you dare to explore first? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more haunted journeys into the places that never let go.